how to paint a cat in watercolor. That's what I'm going to show you in this video. Welcome back to my channel. If we haven't met before, my name is Michelle, and on this channel you'll find all things watercolor, including color mixing and a little bit of mixed media work too. If you click the subscribe button and the bell notification, you can get notified every time I have a new video for you. I make one free video a week here on YouTube on a Thursday and extra content on Saturdays for my Patreon subscribers. So I'm going to do something a little bit different for you this week. I'm going to paint a cat for you, and I'm going to show you the stages that I go through and the techniques of watercolour that I'm going to use to paint the cat. However, it's going to be more of an illustrative cat. It's not going to be 100% realism, because I'm going to level with you here. YouTube is not my job. I mean, obviously they send me bags of gold from all those adverts that you keep skipping. They send me bags of gold. It's getting, it's difficult to get through the kitchen now to, stepping around it all. But I do have a full-time career as a visual artist and as an art tutor, and I also get involved with lots of other things. This week I have an illustration commission, so I thought you might enjoy, coming along with me on the journey as I paint the cat. I'll explain to you as I go through each stage what the cat's illustration is going to be used for, and hopefully you'll learn something about colour mixing and techniques as we go along. So why am I illustrating cats? Well, I'm illustrating a cat for a cat subscription box product. So you may have had subscription boxes yourself. You can get them for makeup, you can get them for scented candles, for food, absolutely anything. And it's basically you pay a monthly fee and they send you a little box of treats and samples. And the lady that I know, Farah, she owns Catitude, which is a fantastic company which sends little cat boxes all around the world. And what's in the cat box? In the cat box is gifts for the cat, things like catnip toys, but also gifts for the owners. So there are things like mugs and t-shirts and little things with cat illustrations on, which is where I come in. Obviously, I have got a discount code for you if you're interested in the Catitude box. I'll drop that in the video description. Now, if you're interested in more about how I figure out how to make the drawing of the cat, and I'm looking through this book here for inspiration. If you want to know more about the full process of how I do the, how I consider what to put on the illustration and how I go through the drawing process and what source materials I might use and scaling up and things like that, I will drop that onto a Patreon video, and I'm going to make a video about the whole drawing process because it would just make the YouTube video too long. So if you're interested in that, if you're on Patreon already, you'll get that automatically. If not, and you're interested in Patreon, again, I'll drop the link in the video description. So I'm going to skip you ahead now so we get to the painting stage. So here's my finished cat drawing. I need to choose colours for him now. Although it's not a realistic cat, the proportions are realistic, I want some of the coat colours to be realistic. So I was looking at these kind of pale orangey yellow colours. So the first one I swatched is this one here. This is Jackman's Art Materials Yellow Ochre. Now, I had some of this left in my palette from the last video I was doing, so I just swatched a bit of that. That's quite a nice colour. I have got a discount code in the description. Don't forget, if you want any Jackman's paints, you can grab that discount code. I then swatched this one here, which is a very unusual colour. I can't even remember. From memory, I think it's something like a limited edition SAA Terry Harrison Autumn Gold. I think that's what that is. But anyway, it's this kind of colour between yellow and ginger. So I think it's really effective, actually. I'll just swatch the other two oranges I've got here as well. So this here is an orange that I use a lot. This is Talon's Rembrandt Permanent Orange. This is your standard orange that's the colour of oranges, I guess you'd call it. And then I have a Winsor & Newton Orange Red shade. This is a more red orange, as its name suggests, and it's very good for sunset. So that's that one there. You can see it's almost pink. It's very coral, isn't it? So these are my options. I think I'm going to start with these two lighter colours, and I may put some darker markings on, particularly with the cadmium orange. So before I start on painting the body, I want to reserve a couple of areas in white. I'm not going to reserve any areas that need to be soft, but I want to get those white highlights in the eyes there. And so I've got some masking fluid here, and this is a ruling pen. Again, I'll put a link in the description. It's my most favoured tool for applying masking fluid, but you can use many things. And I'm just going to reserve those white highlights. Now this is an illustration, it's not fine art, so I'm not above going into a bit of mixed media, a bit of white paint if I need it later on, even some I've got some very subtly coloured fine liner ink pens, I may use those. I didn't want it to be a standard pen and ink drawing as such, so I wasn't going to go in with my dip pen, but I may put some ink touches on later on. The only other thing I want to reserve in the white is I'd like there to be a sort of a white stripe going around the edge of this neckerchief here, which I have indicated in pencil, so I'm just going to go over the top of those pencil lines. And what will happen is when I rub it off, it should rub off the pencil as well as the masking fluid, so I'm going to pop that up there. And you'll notice that whilst I drew this this neckerchief and the glasses and things, I did take note of things like perspective. I think it's really important when you're doing something, even something that's not realistic. I think things have to work properly within that world. I remember getting very angry at the Ant-Man film once. It was hysterical. Ant-Man was skidding around in a bath when he was tiny, of course, and I sort of said to the person who was watching with me, I said, well, that's not possible. You know, spiders can't climb up the edge of baths, can they? If it was a real ant, it would be stuck, and, you know, just being silly. But I think that you have to suspend reality when you're looking at something and getting pleasure from looking at something that's non-realistic. And things have to work within that world, as it were. They don't have to be realistic, but they have to work within that world. So it's quite important to me that the perspective worked on this neckerchief, and I was quite careful to draw all of those little pieces so that they would actually be going in and out of folds. Now, I didn't have any reference material for that. I took the scarf design from something I saw on Google, but as far as the folds of the fabric, I made all of that up. And this is why drawing skills are important, because once you're used to drawing those things from life, you will find that eventually, after very many years, you will be able to just know how they looked and be able to pop them in. So although some tracing was done on the outline of this cat, you know, tracing does not replace drawing skills. They are so important, and you'll rely on them again and again, whether you're using masking fluid or a pencil or a paintbrush. So there we are. I'm just going around those edges there. I'll let that dry, and then the first thing I'm going to do is go in with the body colour. So all of these colourful elements, these will be added later. I will add I want this to be sort of rose tinted glasses, and I will add that fairly early on, because if I did it the other way round, sometimes in watercolour you almost have to work backwards. If I painted the eyes and then tried to put a wash over for the tint of the glasses, it wouldn't work, because I'd smudge all the eyes because of the dark colours in there. So I'm going to do the opposite and go in with the coloured glass first, at least after I've done the body paint, and then I'll be putting the eyes on top and adjusting the tints if I need to at that stage. Now, before I put the body colour in, as in the actual ginger fur, there's going to be some areas that are going to be left as white fur, and it's important they have some structure. So I'm going to be putting some shadow in first, let that dry, and then the ginger will go on top. I will re-wet where I need to. So I'm going to mix up a colour that I think is nice for shadows. I think I'm just going to use my Payne's Grey with a touch of violet in it, because I just want this kind of lilac hint to the shadows. We're not going for realism, and lilac always plays off well against those yellow and orange tones, so that's what I'm going to go for here. I'm going to mix up enough that I've got enough to go around all of those shadow edge areas. So this is the colour I've come up with, and this is Payne's Grey with some SAA Cobalt Violet in. The Cobalt Violet in that particular brand is quite opaque, but I don't mind that actually. As I said, we're not going for realism here. So let's have a bit of body to it. You will see it's much darker than I need, but that allows me then to add it to areas with water and fade it out to get it as light as I want it. So I've got a smaller brush now. I'm going to start dropping in shadow colour. I will swap to a bigger brush when I need to, but for some of the smaller areas like the ears and the muzzle here, if that's the correct word for a cat's nose, then I may need to go onto the little brush and then go back between the two. So let's think about the ears here. So I'd like a little bit of shadow colour in the ears here, and I'm going to wet this ear so that I can drop the paint on top, and that will get a softness to it. So it looks a little odd at the moment, but once it's dried it will dry lighter, And you know, once we start building up the shadow, and then we'll work on top with the colour. It's quite hard to do it the other way around. You always want to be going light to dark. So I've got 2 water jars on the go here as well. So really important that you have a jar that's just for clean water. Otherwise either you're putting mucky water down, or you're just constantly having to go over to the sink. So again, I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm applying the paint a little bit wet, so I'm kind of allowing it to bleed a bit, and this will give us that kind of feathery look where the paint spreads outwards. If I wanted more of a smooth look, I would apply the paint a little bit drier, or at least if that wasn't possible, I would dry the brush and lift out the excess water. But you can see that as it spreads out there, because it's wet, then you end up getting these really furry type effects. So let's think where else we might need some shadow. Definitely under the chin. Anything that goes beneath something or behind something is a place we can put shadow. I don't want to cover up all the white because I want some white on this cat. So if we look at this area here where I'm putting the water, this edge here where the neckerchief is, that's going to be a bright colour. Haven't decided what colour yet, but I won't need to show it in any way. By having fur against the edge, I can use the colour of the scarf to show it. So what I really want to do is just show this chin and where it starts and ends. So I'm going back into my shadow colour, and we'll drop some paint there. Now, I didn't put water above the chin, which means that when I paint next to it, it can't go above that line. It's only going to go below. So we're going to get a hard edge one side, and then we're going to get the softness as it starts to spread down. So just stopping it before the edge of that scarf, because we don't need to go any further. I certainly could take it further down, but I've decided in this case not to. And I'm now going to get on and work across the whole cat body and face and apply shadow anywhere I think it's going to need it later on. Of course, we can always go back and make additions and, you know, changes at the end. I'll keep the shadow colour to hand, but initially I'm going to try and get most of the shadow in first. So now I'm going to paint the lenses on the cat's sunglasses. This is Daniel Smith Opera Rose with just a tiny little bit of quinacridone gold in to warm it up. I still want it to be really different to the colours of the cat, but it was just a little bit too sort of too bluish, the pink before. It's hard to describe. So I've got a puddle of it and it's quite watery, and I'm going to be brave and literally paint it over the whole area of the cat's eyes. Remember, I've still got that white bit reserved. Of course, it will affect the colour of the irises of the cat, but I do have the option of going into either some gouache or adding some white to the colour, just so that I can cover this pink up. But I probably, if possible, I'll leave it there, because that will get the impression that you're looking through the pink, and that the pink went on sort of after the eyes went on, if you know what I mean. So I'm quite pleased with the colour strength of this. I don't want it dark, but I want it certainly to show. I may actually do the outside of the rims of the glasses with the operas, with the Daniel Smith Opera Pink, just to get some real brightness to them. But I'm not deciding colours ahead. I had this strong idea that the cat would wear rose tinted glasses, but I haven't got sort of exact colours decided yet for things like the scarf. Sometimes it's good just to do these things as you go along and see how you feel about them. I mean, I've got to put the colour of the cat's body in yet, so I'm going to see how I feel about the scarf and things like that once I've got the cat colour done. So I've wet this edge along here so that I can get some softness where it hits those areas that are supposed to be white and lilac shadow. And then I'm going to continue painting up here. I'm not going to let this leading edge dry, because I really want to avoid uncomfortable drying lines and backgrounds where I don't want them. I'm also in places going to go into that slightly oranger colour. Now I want a harder edge down here later on, so I'm going to at some point stop painting up here for a bit. So let's go in with some clean water. That water is not completely clean, I still had some paint on my brush. But that will be good enough for now. Then I'm going to go back to this outside edge and start putting in that darker colour and letting those two bleed together, not allowing that outside edge to dry. So you don't have to keep the whole thing wet. Somebody was, I think somebody put in a comment this week on YouTube that they didn't know how to work on this large area and keep everything wet, and You don't have to keep everything wet, you just have to keep the leading edge wet. This stuff down here, if you leave it alone, will take care of itself. Now I may actually go back into it because I think it looks rather flat, and I might actually drop some wet paint in it and get some splodges on purpose. There's a difference, however, between things happening on purpose and them happening because you're in a panic and a bit of it's drying. So I'm going to go up here. You can see I'm using the biggest brush that I can manage to cope with, because that way it holds a lot of paint, everything's fluid, and I don't have to worry that it's going to take so long that I get drying lines. So now I'm going to purposely go back in. Let's take it a bit stripy to get more of an idea of how the cat's fur might be. Those areas now are wetter than the previous areas, so they'll bleed out and make things like backgrounds. You can do them with clean water as well. I've still got a bit of a hard edge here, which I don't want at the moment. I'm going to dry my brush, rinse it in clean water. I've sort of semi-dried it, and I'm going to sweep along that edge. I'm actually going to paint some orange paint down there in a minute, but as I said, I'd like a harder edge here, which I'll do by going in with the darker orange, which should make the edge of that leg show up then. You're all the time looking at making areas show up around other areas. So while that's drying over there, I'm going to do this side of this leg here, and I want sort of a double effect here. I want a sharp edge up here, but then I want it to be kind of soft down the bottom here. I'm going to have to bring the orange all the way down here, otherwise there's nothing to show the edge of that leg against the outside background. I'm also going to put some orange in the tail in a minute. So I'm starting off with that softness there with the water, and then I'll come up here and paint more precisely. If you can hear a real cat, that's because my cat is actually outside the studio. If you thought to yourself, I'm getting so into this cat video, I can actually hear a cat. That is Gimlet outside the studio. And once I've put this bit of fur in, he's now scratching the bench to get attention. Once I've put this little bit of fur in, I will go and get him. He actually just wants to get in the house to his food bowl. Now look at this. Somebody was just asking if they could see my cat. This is Gimlet. And I said in the comments, I said he never comes in the studio anymore. But here he is. He's very black, as you can see. He's being nice at the moment, but he does bite sometimes, don't you, you monkey? What's he doing? So I think my cat's coming along really well. I'm really happy with these colours. They're lovely and bright, and I can add more markings on top if I feel it needs it later. As I said, I don't plan these things completely from the start. I'm now going to add some of the ginger colour onto the face. Again, I'm going to be adding wet where I want wet, and more hard edged where I want more hard edged. I'm going to go quite hard edged around this cheek here because I want it to be defined. But as I come up, for instance, where we have the ear, I'm going to add some water across that so that I get a softness of the fur bleeding into the ear. So we're going for this kind of stylized look, which is similar to my fine art painting. I don't normally work on illustrations at such a size. Actually, all the ones I've done before have been really, really tiny things. Of course, this one could be tiny as well. There was no size specified. She's pretty much given me free rein to do what I want and be as crazy as I want. But like I said, I like the idea of them being available as sort of quirky prints as well. Or at least I like to give myself the, there may not be any interest in that, but I like to give myself the option of doing that. So I'm going to do them nice and large, and then I can use them for anything I want later on. So anywhere that I find I've gone off the water and I want a bit of softness, I'll just drag the water on from the other side, going up the edge here. If the background was going to be dark, I could leave this white along the edge here, it would be fine, but the background isn't going to be dark, so this colour needs to show up. There needs to be something at the edges, whether it's an outline or whether it's actual colour. There needs to be something at the edges all the way around, so I have to think ahead how this will look when it's sort of cropped and cut. I want some whiteness around the face here. Clean the brush again because I don't want to drag that yellow up into the ears. I could paint the whole of the cat's face in one go, but I think for ease of painting and so that we get a little bit of white left in the middle there, I'm just going to stop on one side and then paint the other side. So I'll take the water right the way up there. Water itself, even without paint, can leave a drying line, so I'm going to be extra careful there and take the water over the top. If you're careful, it won't disturb the underneath layer very much. I want to get some softness near the edge there. The paint's quite wet, so it will bleed a little bit. Because they're opposite colours, where it goes across the grey lilac, it'll just go darker and greyer. And I think we'll get the idea of slight markings like we had on the body over here by going in with the darker colour next to the lighter colour. I've got some stronger markings here that I'm probably going to put in with more of a hard edge later on, and perhaps even using something like the bright orange we looked at earlier. I'm going to look at the eyes now. I've still got masking fluid on the little white highlights, so I'm going to paint the eyes next. I'm going to paint the coloured part of the eye before the darks of the eyes. I think I'm actually going to use some neat cobalt violet. I want them to be fairly light and to give an impression that we're looking through that pink glass. Again, this is not a natural cat eye colour, but I quite like the idea of having these sort of violet eyes. And I may even need to go round those with a bit of darker colour as well. At this point, if you're enjoying this video, could I ask you for a quick favour? Could you please click the like button? YouTube rewards interaction with the audience, so if you can click like, share or subscribe, it helps my little channel to grow. I recently passed 10,000 followers, so I'd be really grateful if you could just click like. For now, I'm just going to put that in. While that's drying, I'm going to go on to some of these other areas. So if I go back to the pinks I was using, I've got the Opera Rose pink that I used here for the glasses. I think it would be nice to use that one again for the nose. And then I'll go a little bit lighter and more natural around those shadow areas. So I'm going to pop some pink in there. I've got lots of pinks here. One pink I have is this one here, which is Potter's Pink. Very dull, natural looking pink, and it also is quite opaque. I think that will be a great one for the shadow colours. If I find it's too pink, I could actually add a tiny bit of Payne's Grey. So wherever possible, I'm trying to work within colours I've already used. Even though it's an illustration, I'm trying to keep it looking a little bit on the natural side. So a little bit of Payne's Grey in there. And you see it just cools that colour down and makes it look more neutral. And then I can use that colour just to get a little bit of shadow here. Take this along here, and I'll add a bit of water just below that centre part. So apologies if you missed me painting that bit there. What happened was somebody actually rang me a messenger call, and for some reason that encouraged my phone to stop filming. So I'm just going to pop these in here, and possibly a little bit of shadow underneath that nostril as well. So using that same colour with a touch more Payne's Grey in, I'm just going to get this idea of the top outline of the eye there. When I look at the photograph of the real cats, they've got quite strong, sort of almost like eyeliner on the top here. Just going in. It's a fairly big brush. It's I think it's a size 6. They've got a good point. You don't need to go down to these tiny brushes. You know, I think it's a shame when I see people using sort of a size 1 or a size 0 brush for watercolours, and unless you're literally painting, you know, eyelash hairs on a beetle, it's quite unnecessary. And the smaller the brush, the less paint it's going to hold. You wouldn't get all this way round without dipping back in. I'll be doing that dark centre just in a very strong Payne's Grey. Very noisy pigeon on the roof, I'm sure you can hear him. So next I'm going to paint around the edge of this neckerchief I've got some Talons Rembrandt Cadmium Yellow Light, which is really the colour of Sunshine. There's a little bit of green muck in my palette, so it may have actually got a tinge of green in, but the scarf is going to be green anyway, so I'm really not too worried about that at all. So I've actually got a new sample here. I haven't tried this colour yet. This is an alizarin crimson. So I think what I'll do is I'll put this on the scarf and just get used to using it and see how it comes out. So it's a very strongly pigmented colour. Just do a little bit of the details on this scarf. Looks a bit strange at the moment, but once we get green on there as well, it's going to be great. Next I want to put some green on the scarf. Now, if I'm doing botanical work, I nearly always mix my own greens, but I do have quite a lot of tube greens at the moment, and this is one that I'm very fond of with this, the Jackman's Spring Green. So ready-made greens really come into their own for illustration work, so I don't have to worry that the colour's going to be different the next time I mix it. You'll see that I lean on this piece of paper quite often. That's for lots of reasons, in case anything is just slightly damp down below, but also really important when doing commercial illustration that everything ends up looking as clean and as pristine as possible. So I'm just going to continue working all the way around here. You'll see I've got some little lines here. I don't know if you can see where I've got sort of areas for the scarf to have a little bit of a crease. So I'll go in later on and put those in with something darker. So at the moment I've got areas that are drying, so I haven't quite finished this neckerchief, and I haven't quite finished what I'm doing with the glasses and the eyes either. I need to get the masking fluid off too, but I just want all of that to dry. So now I'm going to go back into the body and put a few more markings on. Also adjust any areas where there just isn't enough contrast. If you look at the ears here, if I completely get rid of this pencil line around the outside, and some areas the pencil will not come off completely, but around here it's just white, there's nothing to show where the cat's ear and the outside is. Now I don't have the option of putting shadow outside of the cat because it's an illustration. It's going to be cut out, placed on a background at some point. So what I'll do is I'll drop a little shadow or even a little bit of orange paint inside the ear, so that the whole thing should work without the pencil lines being there. So I'm continuing to go round and strengthen areas that I think need strengthening. Areas where you've got tone and shadow, bearing in mind that watercolour actually dries quite a lot lighter, it may be necessary to go back into areas. I've decided I didn't like the white here, so I'm taking this all the way down so that it meets the scarf there. I'm still allowing it to fade out at the edges. So I'll take a bit more there. We'll have a bit more in the centre here. I've taken the masking fluid off. It hasn't shown up nearly as much as I wanted it to, so I'll be going into those areas again later, cleaning up with colour or white paint or anything I think is appropriate. I'm going in now with the blue areas of the scarf. There's a bit of a waterline here which I'm not that happy about, so I can probably just take some watery manganese blue over the whole area, and you see how the green still shows through. It just darkens it. You can never expect any painting, whether fine art or illustration, to be perfect, and so as you're strengthening areas towards the end, what you're looking to do as well is clean up mistakes as well as add a little bit more tonal contrast. So see how that looks much better now. So you can see I've strengthened the greens, I've added shadows, and I've brightened things up. I'm just going to finish painting these blue areas now. So at this stage in the painting, I really am just strengthening all the colour values. I'm actually thinking of putting another layer on the green here. I just need everything to be a little bit stronger, and a good way of doing this is what they call glazing, which means to put a transparent layer of paint over the top. I may just put it on these lighter areas at the front here. I just want a bit more punch and a bit more contrast between the white edges. I've also been adding some shadow colours and some oranges. I've got a bit more to do on the body, but I'm just building up those colour contrasts all the time so that the whole thing works without lines around it. So let's work round and put an extra layer on the green. So still making those adjustments, and I have more to do yet, but I do want to just get some more colour on this side of the body. So I'm going to take that near to the edge but not all the way up, simply because it's a big brush. I can't wield it very easily. I don't want to end up clumsily going outside, so I'm just going to take the water around the edges there. And then I'll go in with, this is about a size 10, and I just want to get some of that orange colour around the edge here, just to give more definition to the outer edge. So just going right up there. Again, I can use this darker colour to throw off against the scarf. And I just want to get this idea that we had before of some markings here. Let's take some out now, sort of a fan shape like that. So I've got this white here. This is a titanium white, so it's got good coverage, and I've just been touching up the little bits in the eyes there. If you find that a white watercolour or gouache starts to become transparent, just put another layer on once it's dry and it'll be absolutely fine. I think I may actually, whilst I've got the white, I may actually put a few little extra hairs up here as well. So to put the final touches on, I've got these coloured pens. I've got about 20 of these, so there's loads of different colours, so I can find colours that are very close to the ones I'm using And I'll just use them in a very subtle way and match the colours, and just, you know, anywhere that I think needs a little bit more definition, I'll just take it round there without making it look too much like it's been outlined. I'll also take a rubber around the edges and the middle part of the cat as well, and take off as much pencil as is going to come off. It won't all come off, some of it will be trapped under the paint. Then I'll go on top and highlight everything I need to with the liner pens, but I will put a picture up at the end. Hopefully I can drop the picture in right now while I'm talking and show you the finished illustration. Remember that this is going to be a product in a Catitude cat subscription box. If you'd like a discount off of that, there's a code in the description of this video. If you enjoyed watching me paint this cat illustration, do pop over to my Facebook group. It's got the same name as this YouTube channel. I'll be putting up pictures when my illustration finally goes onto a product. So I painted the cat on a white background so that it can be easily dropped on top of any colour. However, if you'd like to know how to do a really beautiful soft focus vignette, I've got a lovely video that will show you lots of different types of background vignettes you can do, where you just have a subject with a beautiful soft outline of colour. You can watch that video right now.